Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. It's just 11 o'clock. I expect we may have a few last-minute joiners, so we'll just give them a couple more minutes to come online. I trust you can hear me okay, and if anybody's got any queries or questions, or they're having trouble with the audio, please post in the chat, or you can raise your hand. I have just enabled microphones for attendees. So if we do have any questions, or if anybody wants to join or contribute to the chat, please just put your hand up. If you have any questions, you're welcome to either ask them directly, and you can put your mic on, or I can answer them via the chat. So feel free to post any questions in there. We also have a Q&A section at the top. So if you do have any specific cyber security questions that you would like to have answered, then please do post in the Q&A. Maybe you have been the victim of a cyber attack, maybe you know someone that has, maybe you never got to the bottom of what caused it. Maybe you have some specific questions about your business. Maybe you've got high profile clients, maybe you've got clients who have got sensitive data that you have to interact with, and that you want to make sure that you're doing the best that you can to protect your data and your clients' data. So maybe you've got some specific questions around that. Please post them in the chat, post them in the Q&A, and we'll try to keep the presentation as relevant as we can to everybody that's here watching. So you should be able to see the screen share of our PowerPoint presentation. This will be available afterwards, so we can share this out to all the attendees. Apologies in advance if I'm a little bit croaky. I've been a bit unwell for a couple of days, but I'll do my best to get through this one. So if I do have to drop off the camera or the microphone for a minute, please bear with me, just to get a drink. So we'll press on. We've got two simple goals today. Firstly, identifying what the threats are, what are the current threats in terms of cybersecurity for most businesses. We're not talking here about big businesses necessarily. We're talking about mainly small businesses. The cost of cyber threats in the world at the moment is approximately $8.3 trillion a year. That's the amount of money that gets defrauded globally every single year. It's about 3 Coca-Colas or about 3 Apple Incs. It's that volume of wealth that gets harvested by fraudsters every year, which is quite frightening. The reason that the size of the fraud, the financial fraud, is so big is not because people are targeting large corporates. Large corporates have got plenty of defenses. They have a lot of money invested in cybersecurity. They have a lot of technology and active monitoring by people to stop their systems from getting broken into. It's the small and the medium-sized businesses globally that get targeted because they have weaker defenses. They have less in the way. It's much easier to defraud large volumes of relatively small amounts than it is to go for a big bank job with one of the big corporates. And I often liken it to the fact that the reason that Coca-Cola is so big globally is because everybody's had a Coke, right, at some point. It's mass market. Many of you will have an iPhone or an Apple product. It's mass market. It's not selling a premium to the very small percentage at the top. It's selling something of reasonable value to the masses. So this is how you get to a fraud level of $8.3 trillion a year globally. You've got to go mass market. So the point is everybody is susceptible. Otherwise, the fraud wouldn't be that big. Everybody is at risk. So we're going to talk today about what are the threats, and most importantly, what can you actually do about them? There are some things that are just going to be outside of our collective control. We're probably all, we're we're using a Microsoft platform at the moment. We're using a Microsoft platform at the moment, and in reality, if Microsoft got hacked, there's not a lot we could do about it. We're all probably exposed in some way, but we want to look at what we can actually do and what the genuine threats are right now. A lot of them will revolve around email, and you'll be familiar with some of them. So let's just have a quick look through the goals here and the structure of the presentation. So firstly, we have what is cybersecurity. We're going to define that. We are going to, sorry, 1 minute, I'm just going to mute. Can you join up? There we go. So we're going to talk about what is cybersecurity in general, what's the current state of cybersecurity, what are the threats, what proactive strategies can we adopt, and then we're going to talk about some of the services that we offer, which will help you on or your business on a cyber awareness and improvement journey. And this has many benefits for your business, not just from a defensive point of view, but also from an opportunity point of view. There are many businesses that require demonstrating their cyber credentials and their cybersecurity credentials in order to win those bigger contracts, to tender for public sector contracts, and in some cases simply just to reassure their own clients that the client's data is being looked after properly. So we have a range of services here which we will run through, and there's plenty of good advice in there that you can either take up yourself or you can come to us to talk about. So first of all, what is cybersecurity? It's a phrase that we will all be familiar with. Maybe we need to define it a little bit better. So very simply, it's the practice of protecting computer systems, networks, and data from various forms of unauthorized access, damage or theft. It's multifaceted. There are several elements to it, and we don't say it in this presentation here, but there are three main areas. There's technology, which is obviously the tools that you can put on your devices to protect you and on your kind of online systems like Microsoft 365, for example, or Google Workspace. There are technologies that you can use to protect you. There are processes that can protect you. Processes are very much internal, so to your business. So you can have all the technology in the world, but inevitably it's a game of cat and mouse. So someone is always going to come up with a way to circumvent the technology. So you also need processes in your business to make sure that if the technology fails, that you also have a workflow by which you can just double check certain things, particularly financial payments. What are your processes to prevent you from clicking the wrong button or sending money to the wrong person? And then finally, there's controls. So we have technology, process, and finally we have controls. Controls are that final sanity check before you do something. So it might be that you before you install some new software on your computer or your device, you just check with someone secondary, either in the business or a trusted advisor, is this a good idea to install this? Am I going to be opening myself up to risk? If I'm in an accounts department and I'm making a payment to a new supplier or a new client for any reason, what's the control? You've got the technology that's hopefully prevented, say, a scam email from coming in. You've had a process that you've gone through that ideally, vets the how genuine that request is for the payment. And then you might have just a final control, just to sanity check it with a colleague or a senior member of staff or someone higher up the ladder to approve it. Those are the three facets. You can't rely exclusively on technology. Technology is where we come in, but we can also advise and recommend that you think about your own internal processes too. So it's a three-stage process, cybersecurity. It's not just technology. So why should you have strong cybersecurity practices? This is a question that should perhaps answer itself, but let's have a look at some of the benefits. The first thing that you might reasonably think of is protecting sensitive customer and financial data, and also preventing financial losses, which we've actually put at the bottom here. But crucially, I've touched on it already, safeguarding intellectual property and trade secrets. Maybe you have got some special process or some intellectual property that is uniquely yours. You don't want anybody else to be able to get hold of that. There might be, it might be discussed in email. It might be discussed in your file system or your file sharing system. All of these things you have to be aware of, and we have to keep locked down. Crucially, maintaining customer trust and reputation. In the event that you have a data breach, you have to report it. Legally, you may choose not to, but legally you're compelled to report it to the Information Commissioner's Office. There may be fines involved. So fines obviously lead to a financial loss, but more often than not, it's a fairly innocuous email scam. Maybe your company's email system's been broken into. We've seen this 101 times. And you then have to do the embarrassing thing of going to your customers and saying, hey, if you received an email from us, it wasn't actually from us. It was a scammer, and we're very sorry. We put all the measures in place that we needed to fix this, but immediately reputation and trust is lost. So that's a huge area. Compliance with legal and regulatory rules. You may have in your industry or in your country certain requirements to meet. So generally speaking, by following even just a basic best practice for cybersecurity, you're likely to be complying with those regulatory requirements. We talked about costly data breaches. We didn't talk about the legal liabilities. It's possible that you've got the embarrassment of telling your customers that you've had a cyber breach, but there's also a legal element to this. You might potentially get in trouble if, for example, you are deemed at fault if a customer makes a fraudulent payment to a third party, or a supplier makes a fraudulent payment to a third party because your systems have been breached. So legal liabilities is a big one. And then this is all, of course, part of business continuity. If you're running around fixing data breaches and solving malware problems, and your devices are breaking because you've got viruses on them, you've got business downtime. That's costly. Every minute that your team are not working is time wasted and costly, and it can also disrupt your operations more severely than that. You can get backlogged. You can suffer loss of custom because you can't. You're busy fixing, remediating cyber issues. So there's a whole area here beyond just that immediate thing of financial loss that most people would immediately jump to. This is the current state of cybersecurity in the UK. So you can see, this is just astonishing, and this goes back to my point about mass market, how mass market cyber threats are. 39% of UK businesses have suffered some kind of cyber attack in 2022. That's a staggering number. 2 out of 5. That's huge. I said it's cat and mouse. 465,000 viruses or variants on viruses were detected last year. 1,279 per day is cat and mouse. You can't rely exclusively on the technology. You have to have process as well, and internal processes. 81% of cyber attacks happen to small and medium-sized businesses. We know that already. That can only be the case if 40% of businesses are being attacked, but disproportionately weighted in favor of small and medium businesses. 2.39 million instances of cybercrime. How many people have we got in the UK? I don't know, 70 million now, maybe. So that is a significant percentage of people that have been directly affected by cybercrime. Again, there's a better than average chance that someone in this meeting today has been affected. 43% of cyber attacks aimed at small to medium-sized businesses. Only 14% are prepared to defend themselves. I don't know where this metric comes from. It's a little bit of an open-ended one, but the implication is quite obvious that many small businesses don't really have the time to attend to cybersecurity properly, and therefore I can believe that 1 in 10, 1 in 5, somewhere between that number are not adequately protected, and only a third of small businesses have a formal strategy. For medium businesses, it rises to 50%. It's still relatively low. So you can see how all of these figures clearly add up to a cohesive argument. And I would assume that the reason that many of you are here today is to circumvent some of these risks, and you want to be in the other 50%. So we're going to have a little look at our again. So just at this point, I will reiterate: if you have any questions, please do raise your hand. Happy to make this very interactive, and please post any questions in the chat or the Q&A if you want to do that. So we've had a discussion around that. What are the current cybersecurity threats? The most obvious one that I think most people will be familiar with is malware. You can call them viruses. You can call them all sorts of things, but most people will be familiar with the concept of a computer virus, and many of you will have some sort of antivirus installed. Very simply, it's just software that's designed to harm, disrupt, or gain access to a computer or data. Generally speaking, it's intended to cause harm in terms of the data or the usability of your system. I would describe it actually as primarily financial intent. People don't make these things to just for the fun of it. Generally speaking, it's usually there's a financial intent behind it. But first, if you break things, then you generally have a leverage to demand payment in restoring it. They're generally stealthy, as we know. They tend to evade detection. That makes sense. It needs to cause the damage before you're aware of it, so that the damage is bad enough that then the financial leverage is much greater. They will propagate. So generally, once one system is infected, another one will become infected too, particularly on the local network. So if you have a small business with multiple devices in the building, or spread across some kind of network, whether that's even a remote network, if you have a VPN system, maybe propagation is a problem. It has a payload. That's basically just a way of saying it has a means of doing something. It carries out a specific action. Most commonly nowadays, that will be, I say nowadays, most commonly in recent times, it's been ransomware. So it will tend to encrypt your files in such a way that you can't then decrypt them, and then it will charge a ransom to decrypt your files. It's very effective, particularly if you have a computer connected to a file server. If your computer is able to read and write the files on your central server, then malware on your computer can also read and encrypt files on your server, all of them potentially. So that's a common payload is an encryption tool. But others might be, logging keystrokes on your keyboard. That's a good way to harvest login details for websites and that kind of thing. So there's lots of different payloads. And then the final feature is they're constantly evolving. We know that from the previous slide. There's 1,000 new variants a day, over 1,000 new variants a day, constantly evolving, because it's the only way that it can circumvent the antivirus to do what it wants to do. Crucially, what can we do about it? How can malware infect your device? You will know much of this already, but it's worth reiterating. Links and attachments in emails. Slightly less common now. Most email systems will have a virus filter on them before you even see the email. Your computer system will probably have something similar as well. Nonetheless, the speed of evolution means that you can't rely 100% on the technology again. So you still have to be cautious when clicking links or attachments in emails or on the web, on social media in particular. Social engineering, this is probably the most powerful one. The person sending the malware will find a way to convince you to install it and make it seem legitimate. A very simple example might be that if someone can pretend to be from your IT department and sends you a link to say you need to install this now because it's going to make something better, that would be an example of social engineering. If you can be convinced to do something by someone that you believe you trust, that's a very easy way to infect a device. You can get it through infected software. That's increasingly uncommon through your app store on your phone or your app store on your computer. Those apps are delivered with what's called a checksum. So when you install them, there is a little string of numbers and letters which can uniquely identify the bundle of software that you're installing. And by having that unique fingerprint, you can tell, or your computer can tell, whether the code has been interfered with. So the developers made the software. If someone malicious has taken the software and injected some malware into the code, your system will pick that up, because the fingerprint that gets published with the software will say, no, the numbers don't add up. This code has been tampered with. So infected software is increasingly uncommon through app stores. That's why the iPhone in particular is a very secure platform, because you can only install software on it through a trusted app store. But computers, desktop computers, laptop computers, generally they will have an app store on them, but you can also install and download stuff from pretty much anywhere on the internet. Those locations may not have code signing enabled, so you can install infected software possibly more readily on a computer. So you have to be a little bit careful with that. Exploiting software vulnerabilities. Almost all software now is internet connected. So if it's internet connected and there's a software security flaw in the code, then there's a good chance that that can be exploited by someone malicious. And finally, USB and removable media. If your computer is accessible physically, someone could plug something in and deliver some malware that way. Slightly less common, perhaps. Seems a little bit kind of cloak and dagger, a little bit sort of spy novel, someone coming in and sticking a USB drive in your laptop. But I guess it could happen. Certainly less common than things like infected software, clicking links and attachments in emails. How have you been infected? How to spot that you've been infected? Pretty clear. Computer's not running very well, it's crashing, you're getting adverts pop up all over the place, you get warnings that your security software has been uninstalled or disabled, there's applications that you don't recognize, you can't open your files. I've put missing or altered files here. Actually, more often than not, you can't open your files because they've been encrypted by the software. Increased network activity. Most people wouldn't necessarily notice that as that. They would probably see that their computer is slowing down or their internet browsing is slowing down. Passwords being changed, particularly if you get a legitimate email saying your password's been changed unexpectedly, you have to be a bit careful because they're often phishing emails, scam emails. But if your passwords are getting changed, that's obviously a big major warning sign, especially if you didn't do it. And then general kind of things like emails, fake emails being sent from your accounts. We will have possibly all seen this at some point or another. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have been compromised. It may be that someone else has been compromised that you correspond with, and that person, therefore, that the malicious third party has your name and has an association with the person they have broken into. So if they've got your name and they've got your email, they can try and send a fake email from you, even if it's not your system that's been broken into. So you have to take these with a pinch of salt sometimes. And very often you have to take advice on whether it's actually you that's been hacked on those cases. So fairly typical things. Weirdness with your computer, weirdness with your devices, very likely sign that you've got some kind of infection. I'll skip over this pretty quickly. We've covered a few of these. What are the types of malware? Computer viruses, they just break in and do annoying things to your system, often make it run poorly. Advertising, this is a common one. You can very easily inadvertently change your browser homepage, your browser search engine, to a malicious search engine that sends you to undesirable websites. That's a very common one that we see. It's very easy for people to do that. Ransomware, we talked about, where your files get encrypted. And there's various other ones here as well. They're all as bad as each other. You're going to get the same symptoms. It doesn't really matter what the problem is. If you've got a problem, you've got a problem. So we'll move on to the next one. I'll just check for any questions. I don't think we've got any. So we'll move on to phishing. Phishing is another word for scam emails. It's the most common cause of cyber threats. And you will see a number of key features with this. We'll all recognize an obvious scam email. They're poorly spelled, they're not relevant to us particularly, and there's a dodgy link in it, and you can just tell. The problem is that 95% of them are terrible, 5% of them are actually quite good. And it's the 95% of them that make you quite complacent and therefore more likely to miss the 5% that are actually any good. And we know from our own client base, intelligent, computer savvy people, if they're having a bad day, they can get caught out just as much as the next person. So it's something you've really got to be mindful of. Key features: deceptive communication. Obviously, it's going to try and get you to believe that the email is genuine. Social engineering, pretending to be someone that you trust or using known traits of human psychology to exploit trust, curiosity, fear, and make you do something that you shouldn't or wouldn't normally do. Information gathering, obviously, they're going to be trying to gather personal data about you, possibly even to use in a fraud down the line. It might not even be a direct financial thing. If they can gather enough information from you, they might be able to use that against somebody else or one of your contacts. Spoofing, that's when I could try to send an email from any of your email accounts very easily, but because it's unlikely to be coming from your email system itself, which I don't have access to, it's likely to get filtered out very quickly. But spoofing goes on all the time, and it's very easy to just send an email appearing to be from anyone. Most of the more basic spam filters will identify that quickly, but sometimes they don't. So spoofing is very common, and it essentially makes an illegitimate message appear to come from a legitimate email address. And there's other techniques as well. Spear phishing. This is targeted, so someone might gather some information about you on LinkedIn, for example, and then use that to personalize the phishing attack on you. So the email might carry some recognizable information about yourself that is in the public domain, but that makes it a lot more convincing, obviously, as you'd expect. We've also got things like voice phishing. That's your bank phoning you up, or sending scams by text or SMS message as well. So there's lots of different causes to this. Common signs to help spot phishing attempts: check the sender's email. This is always the giveaway. So if the sender's email address is something other than what you're expecting, that's because they're having trouble spoofing the legitimate address, and therefore, that's a very clear giveaway. Generic greetings, obviously, dear sir, dear madam, you will have seen those. You'll spot those pretty much every day. Urgent or threatening language. Threatening, you'll see those. Generally, you take them with a pinch of salt anyway, because they're just so over the top that you just don't believe them. But sense of urgency is very common. And sometimes that sense of urgency to act is very subtle. It might be a apparent message from your HR department to update your HR profile, for example. That looks like it might be legitimate. It looks fairly innocuous, but you feel like you might get in trouble if you don't click on it. That is a sense of urgency, even if it's a subtle one. This one I like: verifying links before clicking. This is an example link. It looks like a link to a friendly website that I'd like to go to. If I check what's behind the link, it's actually going to a scam website. So you have to be very, very careful. I don't know if you can see that, actually. You might be able to see that. I'm not sure. But basically, that link there, although that is a link, you can right click it and you can see where this is actually going to take you. It may not be to the place that it looks like. So very often you need to be very careful when clicking links, as we know. Poor spelling and grammar, we know that's a common feature of a scam email. You spot those a mile off. Obviously, avoid sharing personal or financial information unless you totally trust who it is. And if you don't trust who it is, phone up the person that they claim it is, speak to them on the phone, and double check for yourself. And finally, watch for unsolicited attachments. We know that from clicking things in emails is generally not a good idea. It's a way of malware getting in. So this is phishing. Here's an example. So this is an example of an Outlook message, possibly a slightly outdated Outlook now looking at it, but nonetheless, this is Outlook. This is something regarding your Apple ID. Urgent notice: your Apple ID has just been used to purchase an iTunes gift card from the App Store. These are very effective because you think that you've already been scammed, when in actual fact, this is the scam itself. So you think that you've had a financial fraud committed against you. You're much more likely to click the attachment, follow the link to fix it, whatever it might be. But this is the start of the scam, not the subsequent result of a scam. So you check the email address. You can see it appears to come from Apple ID. That looks, fairly legitimate, but the email address that is behind it is completely something different. There's absolutely no relation to apple.com here. So that's the giveaway. Every single time the email address is the giveaway, it's the first thing we check when we believe that someone has suffered a phishing scam. There's an attachment here, so that's obviously a warning sign. This will be some kind of PDF with some embedded code in it that you don't want to run. We've got a misspelling here, which we've said. We've got poor grammar. Your service has been accepted due to payment after the invoice was issued. This is pretty nonsensical. Again, you generally can spot these. And then they put invalid signature. I mean, it could be a plain sign off, but you would expect a message from Apple to have some kind of Apple branding on it, wouldn't you? So there's a lot of giveaways here. This is a poorly executed scam email, but they do get more clever. And crucially, actually, you've probably got an email. If you're an Apple device user, and I keep harking back to Apple, but it's common ground now. You've probably got an Apple ID. You probably buy things from iTunes or from the App Store. It's reasonably likely that you will have an email that's got this subject in it that is legitimate. So by using the same thing again, using the same common subject line, it's that social engineering. This is something you are perhaps expecting to see. So we need to mind out for the phishing emails. We talked about ransomware briefly. So this is nasty software that gets in, encrypts all your files. If you're connected to a file server, it will also encrypt all of those too. So that's a big problem. And it will then demand a payment to recover the files. There's no way of decrypting them once someone else has done it and they've used their own password that you don't know. So ransomware is pretty nasty. Generally, antivirus is good to stop it, but if you imagine the scenario where your shared file system in your company is being attacked, this is a process thing. So a process in your business might be, okay, well, the marketing department only needs to see stuff belonging to marketing. The finance department only needs to see stuff belonging to finance. And if they need to see something from marketing, they can ask the marketing person for it. So by separating your departments and by limiting access to data to that which you really only need to know, if you do suffer a ransomware threat, you're only going to be exposing, say, 30 or 40% of your data to the problem. So this is a process thing, and this is a big part of what we do as part of a cyber analysis. We look at, what data do you really need? Very often we set up a system whereby you don't have admin access to your own computer unless you need it. So day to day, you don't run your computer with an admin account, you run it with a standard user account, because then if ransomware does get in, it doesn't have elevated privileges to do things on your computer that a standard user does not have the rights to do. So these are process-driven things that can prevent these sorts of threats from being an issue. Limiting access is a very, very big part of the process. The key and the trick to it is limiting access without affecting productivity. That's the problem. It's productivity that goes down sometimes when we restrict access to our own systems, but there's always a balance to be struck, and this is the reason that you do it. There's a range of other cybersecurity threats as well. We won't go too much further into this because we want to talk about what the solutions are at the halfway point. So other threats include data breaches, when maybe your email system gets broken into and people harvest your customers' information. That's a problem. You have to report that, and there are fines involved. Insider threats, possibly slightly less likely in small to medium-sized businesses, maybe more so in larger companies. And these are all kind of various networking. This is a software issue where the software is vulnerable from the day that it actually gets deployed. This is when someone attacks your network with lots and lots and lots of traffic to try and shut things down. That's something that your networking system, your networking equipment, and your router and your firewall should be preventing. Password attacks, these are sort of attacks on trying to guess critical passwords to your systems. IoT vulnerabilities, these are your smart devices in your home, smart light switches, smart fridges, smart toasters. These are generally consumer grade goods that don't have particularly good security on them in some cases out of the box. Often they can be quite vulnerable to attack. So that's IoT, Internet of Things, smart devices in the home. And then we've got deepfakes as well, which is an AI driven thing where you can in theory, I could record a couple of hours of my voice with an AI system, and it could then completely synthesize my voice for anything that I wanted to make it say, or someone else wanted to make it say. So if you've got, I don't know, maybe you've got training videos online that feature your own voice, they could conceivably be harvested, and there could be enough information in there for an artificial intelligence tool to stimulate your voice and therefore make a fraudulent phone call to someone that you know, and be very, very convincing when you do it. So there's all kinds of other threats out there, and that's just scratching the surface. This is an example of a ransomware demand for payments. I won't hover on this too long because it's a bit out of date now, but this was the kind of thing that would pop up when all of your files got encrypted and you had to make a Bitcoin payment to an address to decrypt your files. That was pretty unpleasant. A lot of people fell foul of that one. So what can we do about it? Stage 2. Let me check for any questions. I think we've got any hands raised. No, we're good. So what can we do about it? Let's go on to this. So 6 high-level options here. Risk assessment, first of all. What are my risks? And what data do I need to protect? What things do I need to protect? Training and awareness, you're already doing that by being on this call. So that's great. We can obviously go a bit deeper on training. And we can do phishing quizzes. We can send scam email tests out to your mailboxes, to your company mailboxes. You can test to see if, how susceptible certain members of staff might be to clicking on them. And then you can obviously do targeted improved training there where necessary. That's quite a useful tool. Patch and update management, just simply keeping your devices up to date, is the best course of action for preventing, software vulnerabilities. Just keeping everything up to date is a good thing. Network security. So we talked just briefly on the last slide about denial of service attacks, where someone floods your network with data to slow things down and cause you operational difficulties. Your networking hardware should be up to the job of that. If you're using domestic consumer grade routers, firewalls, switches, you're possibly going to be at more risk of suffering those kinds of problems. Access control and identity management. This is, as we described before, making sure that people can only get to the stuff that they really need to get to. And then if you do have a risk or a threat that comes in, the scope of that threat is going to be much smaller. And then finally, we have the incident response plan. This is disaster recovery. What happens if something does happen? What am I going to do about it? And what's my expected downtime? What measures do I have to put in place in my business to fix the immediate problem, to continue operating, and then to recover from it and prevent that from happening again? So this is, again, very much a process thing. This is not a technology thing. That's why it's crucial to differentiate between the two. We have a range of proactive security strategies. So data encryption. Is your device encrypted? What does that do? If I lose my laptop on a train, my laptop is not encrypted, then somebody could remove the hard drive from my laptop, and even if they don't know my password, they can plug my hard drive into a little USB dock and they can read all the files on it. So that's obviously a data breach risk. So drive encryption, data encryption is crucial. It's very easy to implement nowadays. The slightly more difficult thing is if you've got, even 5 to 10 devices across your organization, quickly checking whether all of those devices have got encryption turned on is not that straightforward. You need a tool to help you do that. And obviously when it goes up to 100 devices, 200 devices, you need a tool to help you manage that. Security auditing and testing. This is something that we can do. We do as part of our regular kind of cyber services. Third-party risk management. Who are my contacts? What software am I using? Are they behaving and managing their own cyber risks properly? So, what third parties are you dealing with? Are there risks there? Data backup and recovery. If something does happen, then clearly if all of your files get encrypted, you need to roll back to a version of those files that were not encrypted. So data backup and recovery processes are crucial. You need to keep, the recommendation is as much as 3 copies of your data in different places on different media to be able to recover from, most conceivable scenarios. Security monitoring and threat intelligence. So threat intelligence will usually come from your antivirus system. A good antivirus will be installed on hundreds of thousands of machines, millions of machines globally. It will know very quickly when there is a new threat, and it will very quickly apply protection to your device as a consequence of that. Security monitoring is more, more about ensuring that the security settings on your device are optimized. It's very difficult, again, even with 5 or 10 devices or even a couple of devices, to physically check every single setting on that device is optimized for the best security. You can't practically do it. And as soon as you get to 20 devices or more that are maybe spread out across the country with remote workers, there's no way you can do this on a regular basis. You need a tool that will tell you that, all of your Macs or all of your PCs or all of your iPhones have got the correct settings on them and the less secure options are disabled. So you need a monitoring tool for that in much the same way you need a monitoring tool to check whether your encryption is turned on. And then finally, regulatory compliance. This is simply following the rules, again, in your industry, generally by being compliant with your regulatory requirements, very often in financial services. That's the most common one, but also with defense, government kind of linked organizations. by following the rules in there, you're going to be streets ahead of most other businesses anyway. So compliance is an interesting one. You may find that you automatically have protection by following the rules. Cyber Essentials. This is a UK-based, UK government-backed accreditation, which is geared toward most businesses. I say most businesses, any business that's got a computer in it. So pretty much every business, with very, very few exceptions. This is government backed and recognised. It is becoming increasingly not just a requirement to tender for many contracts. If you're, in across all different industries, people that want to engage your company are very likely to want to see this accreditation now. But not only that, it may also be a requirement of your insurance. So if you've got business insurance, you've got cyber insurance in particular, you may not be on cover if you are not at least attempting to get one of these picks. Now, the good thing is, the Cyber Essentials basic one is self-certified. You can just fill out the paperwork, send it off, and you can get the certification. We have seen this done with people that haven't taken advice on it, and they have received the certificate, but they're no better off because they answered the questions as the auditor wanted to see them answered, and rather than actually putting in place the measures that would have given them better protection. So there's a double-edged sword with self-certification. It's easy to do it, but actually if you fudge it, then you're not getting the benefit from it. So Cyber Essentials is a really easy way for a company like us or anyone else to help you improve the real basics of your cyber stance in your business. It's not challenging. It doesn't usually require significant investment. Cyber Essentials Plus is more involved because that actually you get an auditor that comes to you. So you fill out the self-assessment paperwork, and then an auditor actually comes to your business and checks your homework effectively, marks your homework for you. And there may be some extra remediation work on this. You may require, you may have to put certain measures in place and tools in place to obtain the Plus certification. But nonetheless, this is obviously regarded more highly than the basic one, particularly if you are tendering for certain types of contract. So Cyber Essentials is a really good way to to just tighten up your processes. It asks very sensible questions. It's not impenetrable like some of the ISO 27001 certifications are. It's very accessible, and with a sensible minimal amount of assistance, you can usually answer the questions properly on this one. So that's Cyber Essentials. That's highly recommended. What's involved? I'm one eye on the time. I want to make sure we get Q&A at the end. We do a readiness assessment. We check how well you're doing currently. We do some advanced remediation to make sure that the questions we're answering are being answered properly, and then we will do the actual assessment questionnaire itself and make sure that that comes back with a success and with a pass on it. So that's the process with Cyber Essentials. The next thing that you can do is improve your passwords. Passwords are a pain because they're very difficult to remember. Every website's got different requirements, and we've all got, I think at my last count, I've got about 1,000 online accounts in my password management tool. So no one can remember that many unique passwords. A good password is generally unique, and it's complex, and it's relatively long. So you can see the chart here of how difficult it is for a computer or a whole what's called a botnet. So that's like a load of interlinked computers that all join together to do things more quickly. How long will it take to guess one of these passwords? Based on a standard character set, and you can see we're in milliseconds and hours for even this one here, which is, I know, a straightforward sequential password, but that's going to get guessed pretty quickly. This one here, although it says it's going to take 48,000 years, that seems quite secure. But when you've got, this is computing power in 2019. Computing power is exponential. It grows exponentially. 5 years later, this figure, it would not surprise me if this was in the hours now for high-end cloud-connected systems to guess that kind of password. So the point with this is that complex with special characters and length is the best way to protect yourself when it comes to choosing a password. There are other measures as well, But in order to remember this, you are going to have to use a password manager. That is a piece of software which can help you to generate strong passwords. It will remember them for you, but from a productivity point of view, it will also crucially automatically fill them and log them in for you. So when you go to your Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk website to sign in, it will I mean, we recommend 1Password. There are several like Dashlane, LastPass. There's various others. 1Password is one of the very few that hasn't actually had a data breach. So we use 1Password generally, and they've been around a very long time. 1Password will remember all the data. It stores it in an encrypted keychain. So if it does get hacked, even a hacker who breaks into 1Password cannot see your passwords. They're stored encrypted. But when you log into Amazon.com, it will autofill. So you don't have to remember, you don't have to type it in. There's no memory at all. The system just fills in your settings for you and you log in very easily. It also supports two-factor authentication. That's when you get a code sent to your device to not only prove that you know your password, but that it is really you. It's your mobile phone, for example, gets the code. So it'd be very unlikely for a hacker to be able to get access to that code to your phone. 1Password supports websites that do two-factor authentication too. You can securely share passwords. So this is quite nice, rather than writing them on a post-it note, which can get lost, or sending them in, say, a text or an email in an unencrypted form. You can share passwords in a secure form to trusted people in your business, team members or family members. So this is a nice tool as well. And yeah, it makes life with passwords substantially easier. So we strongly recommend a password manager for everybody. Very few people use them. Most people go to log into a website. They almost invariably have to reset their password every time they do it because they can't remember what they set it to last time. This is the solution. A password management tool is brilliant. It takes about probably 12 months of use to have a comprehensive list of your most used accounts in there. But within a week, it very quickly will start to not only make your life with passwords much easier, but also improve productivity, because you're not spending all that time every time you need to log into something, resetting your password every time, which is really tedious. So Password Manager is an excellent tool. The next best thing that you can do to ramp up the quality of your passwords is to use multi-factor authentication. These are sometimes these have now been kind of enhanced, and they're sometimes called passkeys now, passkeys. But multi-factor authentication basically says, okay, you're not allowed to log in unless you've got something you know, like a password, something you have, like a phone, which can receive a text, and increasingly something biometric, like a fingerprint, a retina scan, or a facial recognition. So these biometrics are generally now being referred to as passkeys. So if you have a phone or a computer that can do facial recognition or fingerprint recognition, there are an increasing number of websites which will support that. Obviously, extremely hard to fake a fingerprint unless you choose a very unpleasant way to do that. But it's very hard to fake a fingerprint, very hard to do a facial scan. So these are called passkeys, but more traditionally, most websites now are supporting this second factor, something you have like a text to a phone, or if you're using a password manager, the password manager can be set up to generate those 6-digit random codes automatically for you. And in many cases, it will automatically fill them in when you're logging into the system. So multi-factor authentication is the best way to prevent, in particular, your email system from being accessed. As standard, all of our customers, when we set up a new email system or we take over an email system for a new client that's already got one in place, first job is check that every single mailbox on that system has got multi-factor authentication on it, because anybody can hack a password. We know that people have a tendency to reuse passwords, despite the advice being use a unique one, use a password manager. Many people will reuse passwords across systems. The risk comes from, if you have a password that you use in several places, maybe you have that password on something really innocuous, like a local town message board, or your children's school's journal website, or something really kind of not unimportant, but something that you wouldn't worry about too much someone breaking into. But if you reuse that password for your eBay account, for your PayPal account, for your online banking, then those low-level websites that will not have the protection and the resources like your bank will to protect their password database, if they get broken into, then suddenly your email address and password combination is visible to someone that might want to break into your bank or your PayPal account. So by preventing that from happening, the best way to prevent that from happening is multi-factor authentication. Because even if a third-party system gets broken into and your email address and password gets out into the wild, then at least whoever's using that fraudulently obtained data probably don't have your phone. So MFA pretty much stops dead all of the risk of phishing attacks and in particular financial fraud relating to that. Crucially, it also prevents access to your email account, which is the most common way to suffer a major client data breach. So multi-factor authentication is really, really powerful. You need to have this on your email account at the very least if you don't already, and certainly your other online accounts as well. 1Password, incidentally, will tell you when you have a login for a particular website. It will tell you if that website supports multi-factor authentication, and if you do not have details saved in 1Password, it will prompt you to set up 2FA for that website. So that's another benefit of 1Password. It will tell you and it will remind you to follow best practice on that. So that's MFA. And then the final tool here is what I've alluded to at the beginning when we talked about device encryption and the security settings on your devices. How are you going to manage those when you've got even a small business with a handful of devices? It's really hard to keep an eye on the optimal security settings for all of them. So we recommend for Apple devices, we use a platform called Mosel, which is it's called an MDM platform, mobile device management. This was a phrase that was coined when smartphones were becoming widely used in businesses, and businesses needed a means of checking that these phones were being used appropriately when they were inherently out of the office because they're portable. So hence mobile device management. But we use this term now still for fixed devices like laptops and desktop computers as well. And the idea of this is there are several key functions, but primarily it allows you to standardize the deployment of your computers. So if you've got a small or a medium-sized business, you want all of your devices to behave in the same way for all of your staff to simplify training. A tool like this will make sure that all the settings and all the apps and the behavior of the device is consistent for everybody. But crucially, it will also inventory all of your devices, and it will constantly check what settings are active or inactive on them. So when it comes to ensuring that your device settings are in compliance with either your own regulatory policies, your own internal policies, or just following best practice for, say, Cyber Essentials certification, a tool like this will be able to confirm that your devices are currently set up correctly. And if a user has turned something on or off that should not be, you can revert it, or you can at least be aware of it and take a view on whether there is a valid usage case for that to be turned on or off. So a mobile device management platform, really useful, often a prerequisite for Cyber Essentials, because to answer the questions properly on Cyber Essentials, you need to be able to demonstrate that you can check the settings of your devices and certify that they are optimized for your own rules or whatever your industry's rules are. There are also benefits to this. You can improve the support that your users get if you have an IT support service. You can customize the support. So, for example, we have a self-service. This has a self-service portal. So, if you want to reinstall a piece of software that's playing up, you can do it through the MDM system. You do not need to be an administrator of your computer to do this. So, if Google Chrome's playing up, if Teams is not behaving itself, you can just do a one-click reinstall, and that saves a call to IT. It saves potentially significant downtime for your staff. So this is a very useful tool. And you'll see down the left-hand side here, we have other options such as scripts. These might be used for quickly installing a printer at a certain branch office, for example, or fixing, known issues. If you've got a piece of software that you use that has a known issue that you're waiting for the developer to resolve, if there's a workaround for it, we can do a one-click button to fix that. So there's other benefits to MDM as well as just cybersecurity. You can also get much improved staff productivity with this. Crucially as well, there's also admin on demand. I said earlier about not using an admin account the whole time on your computer because it prevents malware from getting in if you do click on a link mistakenly. Admin on demand allows you to just temporarily take admin control of your computer for, say, 5 minutes to install something that you need, and then your account will be automatically reverted back to a standard user again after that time is up. So this is a really good workaround for the slight annoyance of not having admin rights on your computer, but also without impeding your productivity when you do actually need those admin rights. Yeah, so this is MDM. So there are several proactive options here. So in summary, I'll open up to Q&A in a minute if there are any questions. We've talked about phishing, we've talked about malware, we've talked about how things get in to systems, we've talked about checking email addresses for scam emails. That's usually the giveaway. And we talked about remediation. So, Cyber Essentials, really strong starting point for UK businesses, or global, actually. The information is all out there. It's a really good starting point. We talked about password management. Password management, really powerful for protecting your accounts and protecting the things that are within your control. Multi-factor authentication, making sure that you're not just using passwords, you're also using unique codes or biometric information to secure your critical systems, and then using an MDM tool to ensure that all of the settings on all of your devices are optimized and in line with current best practice. So that's everything that we've got on the presentation today. I will just flick back to Teams and see if we've got any questions at this point. What have we got in the chat here? How does 1Password, thanks Georgina, how does 1Password differ from the integrated Apple password vault? Okay, so most systems have, most operating systems, Apple, Mac OS and Windows have their own password manager, and the password manager that's built in is generally pretty good. It's very tightly integrated. 1Password doesn't differ significantly. It does have some extra advantages. In particular, it will prompt you to set up 2FA if it's available for that account. It will notify you if there's been a known data breach. So if you've got an account with eBay in the system, saved in the system, and eBay gets has a publicly reported compromised data breach, 1Password will notify you that you should be changing your eBay password because there's been a public data breach that's been reported, and therefore your data might be at risk. So that's the main advantage of it. The other advantage is that it will integrate with more tools. Generally, the built-in ones will only work with, say, on the Mac, it will only work with the Safari browser sometimes. On Windows, it might only work with the Edge browser. 1Password's a little bit more agnostic, and it doesn't really mind which tools you're using. It's just a bit more sophisticated. The other big advantage of 1Password over the built-in tools for business is that for a business, if you've got multiple users, you can set up a team, and 1Password will allow you to say, put a particular password into the departments that need it, but not others. So you can segment your data and your password sharing a lot better. So 1Password, much better tool for business. It's true of most things with Apple, like iCloud is great for consumer, but it doesn't scale to business. The built-in password manager, great for consumer, doesn't scale to multi-user businesses. So that's generally the difference. How do I best manage shared access documents and keep them safe? You don't like sharing anything, but have a client who's wanting to use a single document which people from 4 offices are going to be able to access. I think you've got to consider the sensitivity of the document. There are several tools that you could use. Generally speaking, the best way to do something like that, if it's say a spreadsheet or like a collaborative kind of design document, those are the most common things that you would share in that kind of way across four different offices, for example. Use an online tool like Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 online. You can use things like Excel, or the equivalent in Google is Google Sheets. You can use that in a web browser. So the file is stored with the one file that you're sharing is stored on the provider's system, and every action that gets taken is generally audited and logged. So everybody has to register themselves and log in and identify themselves before they can open that file. And therefore, any changes that are made to the file are completely transparent and they're logged as well. So I would, Anne, on that one, if you let us know the specifics, just send us an email over, fill out our support form, purplecomputing.com/support. Tell us what your specific scenario is and what the kind of file is you're sharing, and we can make a recommendation. The key takeaway is that if you're sharing one file, you don't have to have it somewhere where all of your other stuff is. It can be separate. So if you're worried about access to all of your other things, the thing that you're sharing can be in a different place. So you put a gap between them. So there'll be a specific solution to that. It will depend on what the exact scenario is. Just let us know. Question: how to detect that an ISP that we use is under attack by a hacker? An internet service provider, that is the provider that is literally providing your internet connection into your office or your house or your home. You wouldn't be able to necessarily detect that they were under an active attack. I mean, you as the consumer of their service might sense a slowdown in your internet connection. That might be a symptom of a denial of service attack that we talked about earlier, where the ISP system gets flooded with demand from someone acting maliciously. So you as the consumer of their service might see some symptoms, but you would not have sufficient information from your perspective to determine what the cause was, whether it was a hack or something like that. If it was, the other thing you could, if there was a genuine attack going on with an internet provider, they would likely have to report it. They'd likely publicize it. They'd probably publicize it through their social media channels if they were having operational difficulties. So yeah, that would be my answer to that one. I suspect you may have a particular scenario again that you're referring to. So if there's a particular scenario, send us an email and we can have a look at the specifics of it and what you do know. This kind of question, it can often be like, if you're using the term ISP, you might be referring to, say, an email provider rather than an internet service provider. I don't know, I'm speculating. So terminology matters, the specifics of that scenario matter. Generally speaking, though, if you're downstream of the problem, you won't have full visibility of it, and you won't know for sure if the ISP is under attack, for example. You're just going to see the symptoms of it. Right, I don't know if we've got any further questions. Let me just check the Q&A. Is there a cost for 1Password, Rhiannon? There are several different plans. I can have a very quick look for you. You can go to 1password.com. You can go to pricing. They publicize their prices on the website. So it's one as in the number one, and then password.com. You can get family. Well, okay. The individual one is $2. So in US dollars, there's probably UK GBP pricing. US dollars, $3 a month for individual, $5 a month for family, and that gives you up to 5 family members. I'd really recommend that. I use it in my own household. We've even got a couple of young kids that have now got their own 1Password accounts as part of our family account. So as they get older, they are starting on the front foot. They've already got a password manager in place. They are already doing the right thing. You can't do that young enough, even if you're the one managing it. So $3 individual, $5 a month for families. If you've got a small business up to 10 people, it's $20 a month for up to 10 users. So that's pretty good. You'll have slightly limited functionality, but it will basically do what you want. And then for a larger business, it's $7.99 per user per month. So $8 per user per month for a larger business. But for a small business, the team starter pack is a great starting point. That's $20 a month. I can pretty much guarantee that for $240 a year, £200 a year, that's about 15 to maybe £17 a month. You'll probably get that back immediately in time savings of not resetting passwords every time you try and log into something. So it's very likely you'll see the time benefit back on that very quickly. That's the cost. Again, onepassword.com/business-pricing. But if you go to onepassword.com, you'll see the pricing pages there. It's very, very easy to find. Anything else? Okay, I've got nothing else in the chat. No worries, Rhiannon, thank you. I've got nothing else in the Q&A, so I'll go last minute or so. Just any further questions, or just stick your hand up if you want me to hold when you're typing something out. So I'll just wrap up if there's just while we wait for any final bits coming in. Oh, Will has you preempted me. Yeah, we'll share the recording. We'll share the PowerPoint as well. So any materials there, you can have that. I've got a hand up. And do you want to? You can unmute your mic if you want, or you can post in the chat.
Probably quicker than typing. I was just asking if there's an availability for Purple Computing to help with either the Cyber Essentials certification or for doing checks and tests on our system for general cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So we've got, if you go to purplecomputing.com, we've got a cybersecurity main header now on our menu, as you'd reasonably expect after this. So purplecomputing.com, go to cybersecurity, and then we've got all of our kind of different services that surround that. So the top one is Cyber Essentials. Larger organizations go to ISO 27001. That's like a sort of Cyber Essentials on steroids. We can do an audit. We can implement anything. Generally what happens, Anne, is we do a kind of a roadmap. So if you want to get to the point of, say, Cyber Essentials, we'll look at what you've got. We'll look at what the risk points are, and then we will say, okay, well, to get to Cyber Essentials and do it properly, we maybe need this tool and we need this tool, and then you're in a position to get the Cyber Essentials. But we can do an initial audit. I see Liam's just linked to the correct page in the chat there as well. So yeah, we can absolutely do that. There's no problem.
Thank you.
Oh, I just raised my own hand. Didn't mean to do that. Okay. Don't think there's any other questions. Cool. Well, we'll wrap it there then. Thank you for your attention, everyone. If you've got any questions that suddenly spring to mind 30 seconds after we end the call, feel free to just send us an email, purplecomputing.com/support. So you can fill out our support form there. And yeah, you're very welcome to post any questions in there, and we'll answer them as soon as we can. Yes, great. Well, thank you for your time. We'll end the meeting, and until next time, we'll let you know. Thanks, Sue. Cool. Cheers all. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you so much.